I greet you, the few brave souls who have dared to venture into this domain of the bizarre. Perhaps I need not warn you, but this is no mechanism for the faint of heart. You see, we've come to think of time by word and custom as a straight line, moving from past to present to future. But before your visit here is over, you will come to believe otherwise. So check your calendars, because the title of our story is Tomorrow is 1966. A very good year indeed on the Nightfall radio show. If someone else were saying it, I would call it a hallucination, or at best a fanciful dream, an etheric ode to times long gone, a phantom monument to the golden age of one's life. But this wasn't the case. It was real. It was as real as the solid ground beneath my feet, as real as the scent of the air in autumn and the warm raindrops of summer. You see, I always held fond memories of my childhood home, the home I was born into, the place where almost all that I came to hold near and dear was born. I even drove over to the old neighborhood from time to time, occasionally even getting out to walk around, to touch the trees and smell the grass, to peer over the fence into the backyard where I once played. Well, on one such day, I pulled over to the curb between my old house and Big Mama's. I think I mentioned in another instance that as a child, our next door neighbors were an elderly couple that were basically de facto grandparents. I probably spent as much time in their backyard as I did my own. Anyway, when I stepped out of the car, I felt almost immediately that something was different. The air, the sky, even the ground. There was something about it that registered in my mind as strange. Then I noticed the cars. Not just the cars going by, but the cars in all of the driveways. They all seemed at least 40 or even 50 years out of date, all except mine. And in my old driveway, to my shock, was something that I readily recognized, but thought never to see again. A light blue 1966 Oldsmobile. Then something impossible came to my mind. Impossible, but inevitable. I had somehow traveled, or had been hurled back in time. What the hell else could it be? I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't hallucinating. I was there, standing outside of my old house. At that instant, I understood that, for all intents and purposes, my present was the past. It occurred to me that I could walk right up to the front door of the house and ring the bell. But what would happen? And who would answer? What would I say that wouldn't make me sound like a madman? And then another question crept in. Was I stuck here? Would I ever get back to 2015? After all, I had no idea how any of this had happened. With all of these questions swirling, I made my way to the front door and once there, nervously rang the bell. A few seconds later, the door opened, and what I saw almost brought tears to my eyes, and I could literally feel my heart pinballing around my chest. It was my mother. My mother, standing there, young, vibrant, full of life. Somehow, I managed to speak. Charlotte Lawson? She nodded and said yes. Then, for some reason, I asked her if she recognized me. I don't know what I was expecting her to say. But what's crazy is that she said that I looked familiar, but of course, wasn't sure. Then I just let it fly. I told her, as crazy as this is going to sound, I'm your son. And as expected, that look came over her face. And you know what I mean by the look. Bewilderment, confusion, and of course, utter disbelief. She looked down for just a moment, shaking her head. I fully expected her to back away and slam the door in my face. After all, that would be the rational thing to do. But that isn't what she did. She stepped out onto the porch and sat down. I sat down in the chair next to her and proceeded to tell her all the things I could think of to prove to her that what I was saying was true. I asked her what year it was, and she said it was 1966. I told her about the assassination of Dr. King, the moon landing, the end of the Vietnam War, Watergate, and Richard Nixon resigning. And every now and then she would throw out a question, and I would try my best to answer. I talked about the birth of my sister and us moving into a new and bigger house. I moved on to telling her about me going to college and then graduate school and eventually having a son of my own. And the expression on her face when I also told her that in 2008, a black man would be president and serve 2 terms was an old familiar expression of joy and wonder. Of course, as an inquisitive and intelligent woman, she asked if anything would change. You know, with me being there, telling her all those things. Wouldn't this all somehow alter the timeline that I knew, that I was explaining to her? But I intuitively knew. Somehow I knew that everything was okay. And I told her, no, nothing will change. It's like a song on a record. The beginning of the song is there on that record, with the middle and the end. Just think of this as you and I being at different points of that song. And no matter how many times you play it, the song is always the same. Every note, every lyric, every time. And she smiled and nodded. We stood up and I gave her a hug. I looked at her and said, I don't really know how I got here. I mean, to this time. But you can rest assured I will see you again. And I could feel the possibility of tears. And I also thought, what about my Big Mama and Big Daddy? Right next door. So much love there. So many dear, dear sweet memories. And then I thought to myself, no, it will always be there. And so I got back into my car, got in, started it up, and drove off. I can't even say at what point I realized that the general surroundings resumed, I guess what you might call normal time. And I drove home. I didn't speak of what happened for a long time. But I should tell you, I did mention this incident to my mother. I told her everything, start to finish. And I asked if she remembered. She kind of looked away and sipped her coffee. But I recognized that old familiar look of joy and wonder.